Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of TeikaTV. Today we're going to be talking about perfecting your product launch. I'm Joe Dube, I'll be your host, and I'm happy to be joined again by Yanni.
Indeed. For those who don't know me, I'm an account executive here at Teikametrics. This is my second appearance, so happy to be here.
And making his TeikaTV debut, we have Mike O'Brien, who's coming up on year 3 of being here with us at Teikametrics to talk to probably more sellers than anyone else in the company. So welcome, Mike.
Yeah, hey everybody. Like Yanni, I'm also an account executive here at Teikametrics, and yeah, excited to be a part of it.
Awesome. So today, as we said, the content's going to be all around those product launches. And what we'll do is hit everyone with 3 main sections. So we want to talk about, first we'll hit on the product page itself, what you can look for, sort of strategies there around optimizing that product page. We'll talk about pricing strategies, how you should think about launching your product, where to start and where to go. And then finally, we'll hit on sponsored products and how to really leverage that to launch your product and your brand. So as everyone's joining, drop in a comment. Let us know where you're joining from. We'd love to see where everyone's watching, and keep this interactive. So as you have questions along the way, just drop them right into the comments and we'll answer those as they come in. So yeah, before diving in, let's hit on the news a little bit. So I mean, it's February 1st. February, big month for Amazon sellers. In the middle of the month, we have long-term storage fees, right?
Indeed. Yep, coming up.
So we talked a little bit about that last week, but yeah, this is your 2-week warning. So really start to think about what to do with that inventory if you're bumping up against those fees. So I know that's something probably comes up in your conversations with sellers, Mike. What do you typically recommend to do when you're looking at aged inventory?
Yeah, so it's 2 weeks is coming up. It'll come up fast. I always like to tell my sellers to always be proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah.
2 weeks is here, so you definitely want to get on that right away. There's a lot of stuff that you can be doing, but primarily what you want to do first is see what SKUs those are, right? So you want to focus on things that weigh a lot, or maybe are your bigger products that incur those higher fees.
Right.
And then check the age of those. Of course, long-term storage fees are for products that have been in there for 6 months or longer, right? So you want to keep track of those, pinpoint where you have a lot invested, a lot of units, and figure out that first, and then you'll be able to take action from there, whether it's liquidate, adjust pricing. There's so many stuff that you can do to get it moving.
Right, there's a lot of levers you can pull. Either you're removing that inventory from Amazon, or you're lowering price, running an extra sponsored product campaign, a lot of options for you.
Yes.
So yeah, thanks everyone for coming in and writing in where you're joining in from. Looks like we got Debbie from Alabama, Gary from New York, Greg from Maine, Jamie from Houston. 5 Oceans Web coming in from Miami, so nice. quite the audience today. So welcome everyone. We're looking forward to talking with you. And again, as you have any questions along the way, write those right into the chat. We'll be monitoring that throughout the afternoon here.
Great.
So yeah, another thing that was interesting that's coming up tonight actually, so in a couple hours, is Amazon's announcing their earnings. So it's always good to keep an eye on that, sort of where they end up. We talked last week around how the stock has just seen explosive growth over this year. It's up trading, above $14.50. So it's a pretty penny just for one share these days. So it'll be interesting to see. Something I'll definitely be keeping my eye on is not only how did they come in terms of revenue and profits, but what notes are there and what guidance is there from the Amazon team around where they see the business going forward, what are their largest growth areas. Obviously, advertising has been one of those that's really driving a lot of growth, and we've talked a lot about. Hey to Abraham joining, doesn't say where, but he says he's here, so hey Abe. And then in addition to Amazon's earnings, it was interesting, saw eBay get a 15% bump today. And we don't talk a ton about eBay, but I think they're still number 2 by far in e-commerce sales, right behind Amazon. And the bump there was because they're sort of breaking up with PayPal. So they've had an interesting history together of eBay actually sold off PayPal, but they remained very close partners. But they're taking their payment processing somewhere else to try to get lower fees for sellers and try to make some more money themselves.
Yeah.
So interesting to see that happening in the space as well.
Definitely.
Another huge sort of partnership thing that we talked about earlier was around healthcare and seeing, I mean, it's quite the trio that teamed up, right? Who did we see?
We had JP Morgan, we have
Warren Buffett.
Yeah, we have Warren Buffett.
Sure,
And of course, Amazon and Jeff Bezos himself. So a lot of cash flow at play.
There's a lot of wealth there.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to sort of see them come together to attack the healthcare industry. Obviously, there's so much room for innovation there. And one of the things that we were reading about was how, instead of people who may be in more rural areas or not have a ton of access to healthcare, like, waiting until they get really sick before doing anything about it. But now, I mean, the focus is on sort of that telecommunication, being able to do a web chat with a doctor.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's going to be really cool to sort of see them put all of their heads and their money together, right, and see what happens.
Yeah, it'll definitely be disruptive for them to come in and kind of act as the middleman, not necessarily try to take over the healthcare industry, but more so just
they're looking
make
to
it cost efficient.
Costs. Yeah, they're looking to cut costs for their own employees, and they see a huge opportunity to do that. What else do we see? So, I mean, I think one of the really interesting things is we've talked a bit about Echo in the past and how that was the #1 seller for Amazon over the holiday period. But now there's some integrations with Seller Central.
Yeah.
So
really cool stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, imagine waking up and just being able to say, Alexa, how were my sales yesterday? So I mean, you can choose to log into a beautiful dashboard like Teikametrics and check in on the health of your accounts. But before you do that, even while you're waking up, to be able to just say, hey Alexa, what were my sales yesterday? How's my inventory?
And if anyone's that listening has done this, because it just got released today.
Oh, is that right?
I mean, it's brand new to us, so I don't have any information on it. If you guys do, let us know how it works out. I'd be interested to know how descriptive it actually is. Like, are they just giving straight numbers or giving some more detailed analysis on what's going on?
Yeah, for sure. Drop in a comment if you've linked up your Echo to your Seller Central account. It'd be interesting to hear how it goes. Looks like we got Matt coming in from Atlanta and Clasina. Is that what you think?
Valkenburg, looks pretty good.
Hello.
Abraham said New York, dude.
Oh, yeah, New York. All right. So heading into the final sort of in the news segment before we dive in, and if you're just joining us, we will be hitting on perfecting your product launch. So we're going to be talking about the product page, we're going to hit on pricing and strategies there around profitability, and then ending with some sponsored product strategies of how to really launch and what to think about where to invest those marketing dollars. So the last piece before we dive into that is the battleground in India. So this is definitely heating up, and it's interesting to see who's making those investments and where. But there was an article today I saw that came out that says Walmart is considering buying a 15 to 20% stake in Flipkart. So they've just been on Walmart's just been on a tear of acquisitions after they bought Jet, which was a huge deal, obviously. But going to be interesting to see sort of how Amazon responds there. They don't want the same thing to happen that happened in China, where they're not as influential of a player. They're pouring a ton of resources into India, but it looks like Walmart wants a piece of that as well. Yeah. So that'll be something interesting to monitor. As
big opportunity.
I love that we're looking at like all three of these platforms, like eBay. Looking at Flipkart, looking at what Walmart's doing, looking at Amazon, and looking at like on a macro point of view, like how each three of them are just like going through their different strategies across different markets too. So it's definitely a battleground. It'll be interesting to see. Yep.
Yeah, and for all of you sellers who are joining us, drop a 1 in the comments if you're selling in any international marketplaces. So whether that be through Amazon in Europe and the EU, or it could be, I know I've talked to some sellers who are selling in Japan and have seen a ton of success there. So drop in a 1 if you've had any success selling internationally. Be interesting to see who's joining us today and how they've sort of thought about that global scale.
Right, definitely.
It looks like we've got Shibu joining us from London.
Oh, speaking
awesome.
of.
Yeah, getting international already. Five Oceans is already dropping in that 1, letting us know they're selling internationally. That's cool. So awesome. Let's dive in, guys. So perfecting your product launch. So you guys talk to countless sellers, right? They're on the phone all the time. We hear them in the office. talking with sellers, both current customers who they've had long-term relationships with, and new sellers who maybe have just heard about Teikametrics or are interested in learning more from you guys. But one of the first things that I'll hear you talk about, Mike, is if a seller's, here's my product page, like, what do you think about it, right? They'll just send you a link and you'll take a look at a product page. What are you looking at when you first get that link and you land on their page?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I look at, and I'm a Prime subscriber myself. So, I'm looking at products all the time and trying to figure out, what is the best bet when I go to a product page, what am I looking for? And the first thing that's going to hit everyone's eyes is the pictures, right? So you definitely want them to be professionally done, have them represent the product in a meaningful way that shows, this is what it is, and this is what you're getting.
Yeah, and just follow those guidelines. Make sure they're at least 1,000 by 1,000 pixels so that customers can zoom in.
White background.
And you're on that white background. You don't want to be suspended because you're not following those guidelines.
Yeah.
Another thing to really think about and take advantage of is, after you've got those regular, light box images against that white background, throw in some lifestyle images, right?
Yep.
We've really seen that can have an impact on conversion rate if customers can really see how the product is used and what it looks like in real life.
Yeah, I was interfacing with a customer not too long ago, about 3 months ago, releasing a product that they had just invested in. They started with the typical white background, right, and then they actually transitioned to lifestyle to see how it would perform, and they actually saw a pretty significant hike in sales.
Yeah.
So goes to show that even when you're testing that product launch, like going in and out of different tests, looking into like what really works, what drives that revenue is going to be.
Yeah, and I think a big thing to think about as well is like, you got to put yourself in the customer's shoes, right? So if you were to be someone who's buying your product, what would you look for? You want everything to be clear, concise, and to the point, but displaying that in some good value.
That's another point, right? Is when you're thinking about that product page, talked about the images, but then you have your titles and your bullet point, your descriptions, and then all of your generic keywords.
Right.
So one of the things that we'll get asked a lot is, do I have to continue to repeat these keywords in all of these sections? And the answer there is no. You don't have to feel like you need to stuff this thing over and over again. If it's in there once, Amazon's going to see it, and you'll be, you don't really get a huge lift from trying to stuff it in as many places as possible. And Mike, you were saying how it's more advantageous just to have that clear, concise message rather than have this huge wall of text that people may just get intimidated by and skip over, right?
Yeah, a lot of fluff can be put in there.
Right.
So you just want to keep it to the point, allow for if someone comes on your page and lands on it, it's a reasonable amount of information that they can read.
Yeah, and I would say, what are your key differentiators, right? Are you made in the USA? Is the product 100% leather? Whatever it may be, you really want to communicate that as fast as possible. So put those key points in the title. Make sure, if they're not in the title, if they're in those top couple bullet points. But you want to, it's such a competitive marketplace, right? New sellers coming online every single hour. So you really want to display what sets you apart from the other products out there, right? You may not be competing for that buy box if you're your own brand, but you're still competing with dozens, hundreds, thousands of other products.
I think a good point to that as well is I talk to a lot of sellers, and it's natural for me to just click on the company name. It'll say sold by the brand and then shipped by fulfillment by Amazon.
Right.
If you click on your company name, it'll take you to your reviews, your seller feedback.
Right.
A lot of companies don't even know that. You can actually put in a story about your company. Hey, this is us. This is how we came here. This is our background.
Right. Yeah. Always take advantage of those extra placements. That's a great point. I mean, anywhere on Amazon where you have the ability to customize, add imagery, you should be doing that. I mean, not only in that like seller profile, but also if you're a brand registered customer, make sure you have that enhanced brand content.
Definitely.
It's a place where you can really tell your story and expand beyond the limits of the title and the 5 bullet points.
Yeah, I really think it also just delivers the trust of your brand as well. When you have just that little snippet of imagery and text for the brand enhanced content, you're able to really present yourself as like this professional brand, and that in and of itself is just going to really help garner those original reviews and those sales. So
I agree.
Looks like Natalia is joining us from Dallas. Hi, Natalia. And we got our first question in. How many characters do you recommend for bullets? So obviously, we're sort of leaning more towards being clear and concise rather than having huge bullet points, because often that can be intimidating for someone, right? I want to get information on what the product is and what separates it from everything else on Amazon, but I don't want to spend, all this time trying to read through this text that may be repetitive and too verbose.
Yeah, I would say like 2 sentences tops would be sufficient.
Right.
You don't just want it to say, this type of fabric made in USA.
Yeah.
You don't want to keep it too short.
Right.
You want to add some context there. But yeah, I would say two sentences tops.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another dimension of this is like not only it's like the length, but it's also how many bullets. And I think to the point where you really want to be concise. I don't think anything more than 5 bullets is like really all that
there
necessary.
are only 5 bullets.
Right,
so,
exactly.
So you're
but it's like,
limited.
do I do the 5 bullets for all of them, or for my new product, or do I just keep it concise with those 2 or 3 value add that makes me different from my product or different from my competition?
And you brought it up earlier. It could be an opportunity to test, right? So, as your product is launching, if you test different bullet points or test the ordering of the bullet points to see what type of lift you can get on the conversion rate.
Good point.
Awesome. Another thing to consider, so before getting into the second piece on pricing, is your off Amazon presence, right? So a lot of brands may have set up something with Shopify or WooCommerce or some of those other options out there. But speak to why you think that's important, Mike.
Yeah, I think it just adds validity to your brand, right? So if I'm searching on Amazon for a sweatshirt, let's say, and I come across a brand that I don't really know, one of the first things that I'm going to do if I'm intrigued by that product is search them on Google,
right?
And find if they have their own .com site and read about their story. And then if I do that, I can also find their other products. Maybe I get to their storefront or their .com site and I don't want the sweatshirt. I might buy a beanie from their storefront and the sweatshirt from Amazon. So it just adds that extra kind of
it's legitimacy, trust,
legitimacy,
right? If I see that this is a brand that has a professional website outside of Amazon, I'm going to be much more willing to buy and invest in that product because I know who stands behind it and what their story is.
Exactly.
I think that's a great point.
Yep.
And for anyone who's just joining us, we are live from Boston this afternoon talking to you guys about product launches. So we've talked a bit so far about your product page optimization, how to think about images, titles, bullet points. Now let's get into pricing.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting one. And we get a lot of questions from sellers about this too, is how should I be priced? And what we recommend doing is starting low, right?
Yeah.
When you're first launching your product, it's really all about sales rank and driving units, because if you start off at your goal, say you want to, after you've done your analysis, your unit economics, you understand all those costs associated with selling, you determine, I want to ultimately sell this for $30. You may end up, you should probably start selling it, $15 to $20 to start getting sales going, because if you start off on the higher end, you may never get those initial sales and build up those initial reviews. So it looks like got a question coming in. A couple questions from Joel. Would you say an apparel picture on a model would convert better than one shot on a ghost mannequin? I think so. I don't have a ton of data on this, but it would be a great opportunity, I think, for you to do some testing. But I tend to think, when I'm browsing personally, that I'd like to see it on an actual person rather than a mannequin.
Yeah, and I agree. And then one thing that I do as well when buying apparel is, if it's on a model, usually they'll say the model's size,
right,
and their height, weight, so you can get a better idea of what size will work best for you.
Yeah, 6'1", wearing medium.
But yeah, you got to test it out for sure.
Right. And then we got a question in from Shibu. Question on the back end search term: should the keyword be typed as it would make sense? Garlic, stainless steel. The order doesn't matter there, so you don't have to worry about which way you're putting it, as long as that word ends up in the back end keywords. You're all set. And again, to our earlier point, you don't need to continue to repeat words. So if you're saying garlic, press, you don't need to continue to say like garlic self-cleaning press. You can just continue to use that word once.
Yeah, another note here is also competitor brand keywords.
Right.
So you definitely want to make sure that you don't have those embedded in, whether it's the front end or back end of your product.
Yeah, it's just not worth it to try to get like some sort of short-term bump by breaking the rules or bending the rules on the Amazon guidelines. We've seen sellers get their listing shut down because they weren't in compliance.
Yeah.
And being out of having the listing shut down for a couple days can put you back months in terms of search terms, and you may never climb back to where you were because it's really hard to recover that sales rank once you go several days without actually selling.
It's tough to get it back up.
So back to the pricing side of things, the strategy starting low, continuing to test up as you gain sales rank. One of the things to consider is, as you look at price, how do you find, like, where do you see the biggest struggles from sellers on like understanding their profitability? Like, is there a particular part that is tricky?
Yeah. I think it's tricky in general to know your profitability on Amazon, just given that they don't know your costs.
Right. So you just get your lump sum every 2 weeks in your settlement report.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question I ask most of my sellers is, how do you think about pricing?
Right.
And a lot of them I talk to them on the phone, but I would guess are staring blankly back at me. Because it's not something that people often do, is think about, okay, how is this price affecting my bottom line?
Right.
There's a lot of costs that play into, especially when you're selling through FBA, all the costs associated with that. So you really have to dig into actual numbers.
Yeah, because there's all those estimators, right?
Yeah, and calculators. You got to.
And you don't want to get too, put too much into those estimators. You want to look at the actual numbers, right? And
every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we've seen sellers, not only are you helping your overall business by really understanding your numbers, but by auditing that settlement report, we've heard of sellers, uncovering thousands of dollars that they've been incorrectly charged, right? If the weights and dimensions were entered incorrectly and they were being charged for something that, was a lot heavier or larger than the actual product, opening a case, and typically they'll get that reimbursed really quickly.
Yeah. Or the small and light program, if it should have been a part of that. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, and then Marty just wrote in, is it okay to have your product priced differently on your website versus Amazon? I've seen this with several websites. Yeah, that's a great question, is what is your strategy going to be across multiple platforms as it comes to price? I don't think you have to always be the same price. There's a lot of advantages to selling on Amazon. People get that, if you're a Prime member and you're selling through FBA, they get that free shipping within 2 days.
Right.
There may be some value there. But if it is something where you're more than a couple dollars off, that may put customers in a weird position of not.
What are they trying to do?
Yeah, or to try to get a little confused. So I would try to stay in the same ballpark across channels. Not to say you can't differ that pricing by a couple dollars to compensate for different margin profiles and different costs in other channels.
Exactly.
But I wouldn't be too obsessed with always having the same price in both.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it shows a certain level of continuity, but to your point, I think like if you keep it in that relative margin, I don't think you're going to see much of an impact in terms of like the velocity coming to your website versus Amazon.
Right.
So yeah, I think just the important part is like keeping it within at least a margin and not go absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
And you can certainly run promotions on one platform versus another, right? And sellers are used to, buyers are used to seeing that of, oh, this is, has a coupon on Amazon, or they're running some sort of % off on their own site. That's something that you can do to sort of get different prices through those channels, is using those promotional tools.
Which is just question.
Oh, great timing, Abraham. From New York. I'm launching a new product. Should I waste any time with coupon websites trying to get traffic to my Amazon listing, or is it better with sponsored ads? I'd probably recommend sticking with sponsored products. We've seen just a much better return there because, and we'll hit on this next, is you can be launching a product and in day one have your product be on the page 1 of search results next to the biggest brands in the world, right? Think of how powerful sponsored products is. Yeah, I mean, I think we can transition there, right?
Yeah,
so, I
let's
mean,
get into it.
let's get into it. I mean, we talk a lot about sponsored products, but it's such a powerful tool, especially when you're launching a product or a brand. And how we think about this is a lot of what we talked about with pricing, right? Is you're going to have to make that initial investment during your launch. So we got a question coming in from Veronica. I just started advertising my product with PPC and my ads haven't been doing well. What would you suggest to do to improve? So yeah, there's a lot of optimization techniques that we recommend. If you want to dive in further to that, I'd recommend you head over to Teikametrics.com and request a demo, and you can talk to one of our specialists, and they can go through more details on how exactly to optimize your campaigns in our playbook. But just off the bat, I would be testing your bids, looking at those automatic campaigns to see what search terms are working well, and looking for the opportunity, if your ads aren't doing well, where are you spending but not seeing that conversion? Because that may be an opportunity to add in some negative keywords to stop that inefficient spend.
And it goes back to what we mentioned about product pages as well. I talk to so many sellers who, let's say they're selling a wallet per se. And a negative keyword will come up. They're getting clicks against men's wallet, but it's not converting. Well, then it's a bigger picture, right? So you want to go back to your product pages. You want to take a look at your pricing, your pictures. There's a lot more to be told.
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, it's not always the ads that are performing badly. It may be once you're, if it's a highly relevant term and you're driving traffic and you're getting those clicks and spending the money, but you're not getting the conversion, it's exactly right. It's like, what's wrong here? It goes back to my product page, goes back to my price. Am I just not competitively priced? Does my product page confuse people or look unprofessional? But I think that's a great learning when you're doing this is, if you're seeing a lot of spend without people checking out, maybe the problem's not with your sponsored products, but with your actual product page listing and your offer.
And you also have the inverse too, though, right? So like maybe you are performing relatively well on sponsored products and you really want to dig in, why are these performing well? Looking at those profitable keywords that might, or at least top, in terms of revenue figures that are providing you with a lot of sales on the top line, making sure that you're taking that data and putting those keywords into your listing to kind of get that cyclical motion going.
Yeah, that's that whole flywheel effect of really using the data to inform your success. So where you see those top performers on sponsored products, if they're not in your title yet, put them in there, right? A couple other questions coming in. So how frequently can keywords be changed? As frequently as you want. Go crazy, Greg. Just by PPC alone, will we be able to create the same sales volume for first page sellers have while launching? So no, not necessarily. I think it's one piece of the puzzle, but you'll also want to continue to grind and try to get organically ranked as well. Sponsored products is really going to help you do that, but it's not the only tool, right? Typically, I see the sales from sponsored products make up maybe 15 to 30% of a seller's total sales. But that percentage may be larger when you're first launching because more of your sales may be coming from paid sources rather than organic. Which keyword research tool do you recommend? From Abraham. So I think one thing that we really preach here is the power of the data that's coming from the search term report out of Amazon. That's exactly what customers are entering into the search bar and how they're finding your products. So that's really the gold standard of data and keyword generation, is using automatic campaigns, using broad keywords to generate those search terms that work well. Amazon is never going to share with you the organic results of how people find your products, not through the paid channels. So really take advantage of that data through sponsored products and live in that search term report.
Definitely.
Couple questions coming in from Esther. What else would you recommend doing when launching a product? The price is very low and it's in sponsored and it still doesn't go. So one thing you can consider doing, I mean, it sounds like you're taking the right steps of having a low price, having your sponsored products campaigns going, Make sure your product page is looking good. The other thing is think about external traffic, right? Drive traffic to your Amazon page through Facebook or other social advertising. Just because it is such a global platform doesn't mean you can't go out and hit the streets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about local, if you're selling yoga mats, go down to your local yoga studio and hand out coupons, tell people about your product. It's not, you cannot only live in Amazon, right? It's a real.
Yeah, and even if she does, Esther does have some products moving, we didn't really touch too much on reviews.
Yeah.
So reviews are kind of, Amazon kind of reeled the reins in a little bit there to even the playing field, but it doesn't mean you can't ask for reviews. It just has to be genuine. You can't incentivize positive reviews or anything like that, but still send follow-ups to all of your customers, hoping they enjoyed the experience. And that's a big point. I think reviews really tell the story of a brand, and people do read them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you can't pay for those reviews like you used to be able to a little over a year ago. Amazon shut that down, which I think is a good thing because it improves the overall trust and really puts the customer first. I would be much happier when I'm launching my brand to actually put that money in sponsored products rather than in giving away product to try to get those reviews. Looks like we'll take one final question here from Yoel and wrap up. So he says, new product I launched received a few negative reviews on an issue we had initially with the packaging, now resolved, and the product is in a 3.5 rating. Seems no matter what we do, the page doesn't convert well. How do we get out of this issue? How do we generate more reviews to increase the ranking? So yeah, that's a tough position to be in. I mean, one thing to consider would be to start over and sort of have a new model. Make sure you have a new UPC if it is something that you corrected, because those negative reviews can be really impactful. But the other point is, to Mike's credit, is go after those reviews. Stay within Amazon's guidelines, but you can still send those follow-up emails asking for reviews, and just try to get your overall number of reviews up so that you're not weighed down by those couple initial negatives.
Yeah, and I think it's important to gain insight on those negative reviews too. Maybe try to follow up with those customers and see what exactly it was that led to that poor experience. And maybe you'll be able to hone in on, it's more of a long-term kind of return on investment there, but I do think that over that long run, it's important to figure those issues out.
Awesome. And hey to Rick, we just talked on the phone this week, so how are you? Hope everything is well down in Florida.
That's great.
And looks like we have some people answering their own questions in there. So Jamie asked, can you send follow-ups to FBA customers? And Braden came in saying, absolutely, you can contact customers up to 4 times. So yeah, stay within the guidelines there, but feel free to, if it is related to the order, you can contact those customers. And there's some software out there that helps you reach out after a sale. So yeah, with that, let's wrap up. So talked a lot this afternoon about launching a product. First hit on what was our first point, Mike? Quick quiz.
News on Amazon, long-term storage fees.
We did hit
long-term storage fees.
We did hit on news.
Product pages.
Yeah, product pages.
Bingo,
so
winner.
Look at your images, get those professionally done. We talked about making sure you're following the guidelines there around having those 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. You're on the white background, mixing in some lifestyle images, and then after your product page is looking good, number 2 was around price. So this age-old sort of strategy of starting low. I mean, I think we got a question in about, should you think about using coupons or discounts, or should you start with a low price? I'd recommend just starting with a low price. If I see a discount that's just like absurd, or sometimes people will try to have a list price with like $100 and selling something for $9. It just sort of seems fake to me, right? That's a huge red flag. And I think that's why Amazon's getting rid of that list price feature. So start low, build it up as you continue to gain sales rank. Test up those small increments. Move from $11 to $12. Don't make a big jump all at once, but slowly crank it up until you get up to your ultimate goal, and really understand what those margins look like. Dive into those settlement reports so that you know all of those fees that you're getting hit with each week.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then lastly, use sponsored products to really help supercharge your listing. So you've got your listing looking good, you've got your price starting off low, and you're starting your campaigns. So start with those automatic and those manual campaigns. Get aggressive at first.
Yep.
It's not an expense, right? You'll view it as an investment in the data from Amazon.
Just because you set a high budget does not mean you will hit it.
That's right.
And just because you have a high ACOS doesn't mean that it has no value. So
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think we'll end there. And to echo Greg's comments,
Greg says go Pats.
Go Pats.
Yes.
So hope everyone will be tuning into the Super Bowl, and we'll catch you again next week, because if it's Thursday, it's TeikaTV. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Joe. Cheers.